Wilhelm Wundt was a German physiologist and psychologist who is known as the founder of experimental psychology. He earned a medical degree at the University of Heidelberg in 1856. He was appointed lecturer in physiology at the university, where he wrote contributions to the theory of sense perception. Wundt offered the first course ever taught in scientific psychology in 1862. Until then, psychology was regarded as a branch of philosophy and was to be conducted primarily by rational analysis. He stressed the use of experimental methods drawn from natural sciences. Wundt wrote one of the most important works in the history of psychology, Principles of Physiological Psychology, where he explored the experiences of consciousness, including sensation, feelings, and ideas, also the concept of conscious perception. The methodology he prescribes was introspection. In 1874, the most productive phase of his career was as a professor at the University of Leipzig, where he established the first psychological laboratory in the world.
Wilhelm Wundt proposed many wonderful contributions to the world. Some of his major contributions include structuralism, which is one of the first schools of thought, introspection, reductionism, and experimentation. Wundt's contributions inspired some of his students to continue his work, making room for improvement and awareness. This evidently aided in developing psychology as a science. Some of his students include Edward B. Titchener, who improved and developed Wundt's theory of structuralism, James McKean Cattell, who was the first professor of psychology in the United States, and G. Stanley Hall, who created the first experimental psychology lab in the United States. It is clear that Wundt's contributions led to many significant outcomes for our world. The contribution I would like to highlight is Wundt's invention of the world's first experimental psychology lab. He opened the Institute for Experimental Psychology in the University of Leipzig in Germany in 1879. Wundt's target was to record thoughts and sensations so that he could analyze them to their most basic elements. Behaviorism was brought to attention by the exploration of studying the human mind and behavior in his lab. He used objective measures and control in order to do this. Wundt's experimental psychology lab aligned with the period of time because he began the shift in the 19th century that changed the view and study of psychology to an accepted scientific discipline. Furthermore, Wundt's invention led to many other important contributions within the 19th century, such as Sigmund Freud starting therapy with patients. Lastly, Wundt's invention of the experimental psychology lab aligned with both science and understanding human behavior. It aligned with science because the lab used scientific methods in order to understand the human mind and behavior. Furthermore, by using science to do this, the understanding of human behavior was able to be explored in carefully controlled conditions, resulting in an overall greater understanding of it, which would subsequently lead to even more discoveries in the field of psychology.
Wilhelm Wundt created the concept of introspection, which was also understood as experimental self-observation. This technique was done through training people to analyze what is in their own thoughts carefully and objectively. This method differed from casual introspection because Wundt's lab presented the observers with controlled sensory events. He also believed that observers should be in a state of extreme attentiveness to the stimulus and to have control of the situation. Currently, introspection is not used by researchers as there are many limitations to this experimental technique. The major criticisms to introspection were that it lacked scientific reliability and objectivity. Furthermore, given the process is subjective, the results cannot be repeated or examined. Major contributions from Wilhelm Wundt's experimentation benefited behaviors because it set a standard. His methods encouraged researchers to use his experimental approach and follow the scientific method. This aligned with his belief in voluntarism, which meant people have free will as well as knowing the intentions of psychological experiments if they were participants in a study. Another contribution was the theory of structuralism, which was based on the basic elements in the consciousness. Wundt's perspective was based on the mind being able to be broken down into structures that are classifying the conscious experiences into smaller portions that are analyzable. In doing so, he studied sensation and perception. This allowed him to deconstruct participants' observations of objects, images, and events into basic parts. Conversely, Edward Titchener focused on observation and analysis. Structuralism did not last past the 20th century and only paved the way for other movements such as functionalism, Gestalt psychology, and behaviorism as previously mentioned. These are all important contributions today, including the foundational ones that have evolved and were built on by other thinkers. Thank you for listening.